So my name's Kate Bonner. I know everyone in here, which is really lovely, but maybe not those playing at home. I'm the head of music at St Andrews Anglican College at Bridge Springs, and which is up on the Sunshine Coast. And this is sort of what we've been doing, I guess. So I thought I'd just share a document with you, as in physically or digitally share this as well, as in email it to you, because it's got a bunch of links and things in it as well. If that's okay with Rachel.
Yeah, of
I
course.
don't know if I can actually do that right now, but perhaps I won't hand the worksheet out to you students just yet because it's a distraction then maybe. So I'm just going to share the screen. I'm quite guilty of thinking I don't have enough, and then 4 hours later someone has to get me to be quiet. So I'm really going to try and rip through quite a bit of content I sort of prepared, and if I get bogged down on something or you want me to elaborate on something as we miss out the next bit, then it's all written down for you to look at and engage with. There's much more that's been going on as well. Of course, I just tried to identify I thought two places where things were working quite well, in the sense that we really didn't have to change too much in context. So it's essentially, I guess the theme is sort of what we've learned and what we're keeping. A lot of the stuff we're keeping has been already in place as well. So we had quite a nice, smooth sort of transition in many ways, but of course, a lot of sort of bumps and hurdles we had to jump over and difficult things we had to cross as well. So anyway, I thought the best sort of junctures for that would be year 11 and year 7. I really enjoy working with year 7s. We've really, over the last probably 12 months, really just thrown the program away and started again, essentially. A lot of it was underpinned by a lot of work that I did quite a number of years ago. And I think we probably just pushed it a little bit too far and maybe weren't as sort of responsive to some of the things that were out there. And I guess this has been a really good, or I don't know if I should say that, this situation hasn't been good, but it has actually, forced our hand a little bit in terms of, well, how can we do something that we've done in a different way? Or how can we perhaps enhance that? And I think we've found ways to continue things that we've done and have done over the past few years, and found some things, some ways we can do things anew, so to speak. So look, I will just share my screen now, and I'm going to flick between a few documents. So I'll just actually share the whole desktop so you might see yourself. Okay, is that working? You can see the Word document. It's not, is it?
It is, it's working, and Zoom's clever enough not to share the Zoom itself. So it'll share everything but the Zoom.
That's really good. So I'm just going to sort of navigate across pages that you'll see moving, and I hope, please don't get sick. It makes me sick zipping through pages sometimes. But look, I'll try and keep this really sort of to the point and focus on essentially what we've learned and what we're keeping. So I've provided a little bit of context there. Essentially, we've been off, like most schools, I guess, in Queensland at least, with the fact that we pretty much missed the end of term 1 and the first few weeks of term 2. But we did welcome our prep to 2 and year 11 and 12 students back now almost 2 weeks ago, which is really so good to see them. I didn't sign up for staring into a computer and talking about things I love. I need to have people around me to do that. So talking into the void wasn't really my thing sometimes. When you'd ask a question, no one would respond. So hopefully I've got a little bit better at that now that I'm sort of doing this call with you now, but it is quite uncomfortable. You sort of need that feedback in the moment sometimes, don't you? And when all your year 7 class has cameras off, it can be quite fun. We essentially have a platform called Seesaw in primary that we use, and Canvas in secondary. And I'll show you a little bit of Canvas because it's probably a little bit easier to share than Seesaw. They're essentially like online platforms or LMS systems or whatever they're called. And we sort of house all our content, learning content there, videos and documents and other things. It's really a really fantastic, the Canvas page in particular, it's a really fantastic resource to have. And I've gone from using it as an online sort of repository almost to something that is a really great teaching tool. So that's been in place for quite a number of years. So that allowed our transition to be a little bit more smooth. Our remote online sort of period was really pre-recorded videos for our primary school students. And I used a few other things which I won't share in the way I sort of intended them in the primary school, but I've used elements of them in the lessons below that you'll see as well, particularly Explain EDU, which is a fantastic program. And we had supporting worksheets and tutorial videos that were all uploaded to Seesaw, as well as I think there's 21 tutors here in the immersion program that did pre-recorded videos, which was just phenomenal that they invested that time to keep the students learning. We did live lessons through this period as well, in the sense that I'd pretty much do this and be the teacher on the other end of the screen, and they were captured in stream and then uploaded to Canvas as well. So that, I guess that's a brief sort of context of where we were in that period that I'm currently sort of living. And I guess a summary of that online period, and I guess this is sort of tinged with, well, I'll go through the list actually. It's a bit of a what we had done and what we experienced kind of list here. We really aim to keep things as normal as possible. I thought that was really important. I have to be upfront in the sense too that I'm quite a privileged sort of environment here as well, and that we are very well resourced as a department. But you know, you still have to know what to do with all that stuff you've got. But our focus was really on music and relationships and support over this period as well. I thought perhaps even more so much relationships and support was a really big focus. But, you know, we're music teachers, so I was teaching them music. It wasn't sort of a babysitting exercise like I've heard at some other schools. And of course, that may be forced by resources and other demands and competing things. But I had the opportunity to really teach music, hopefully in a musical way, which has sort of become a borrowed catchphrase. And I really ran with it. And we really tried to navigate what we'd already set for our year 7s in the case that I'll show you below, and our year 11s, because that is rather inflexible in many ways with the new syllabus in place and what we had to do and when. But importantly, our focus remained on teaching music musically. As I said before, everything that I asked the students to do was really led towards a specific learning or a specific skill, and how it contributed to their learning first and foremost, but also their assessment, just with keeping things as normal as possible. So that was really positioned up front. I didn't want to waste their time. I didn't want to waste my own time. We really tracked student engagement through submission of smaller weekly class-based tasks that were uploaded into Canvas. That should be, and Seesaw. My OCD is going to change this right now. You're welcome. Folio-based work and compositional work underpinned everything that we did. We focused on practical experimentation with the materials of music, so we're working musically. We explored, we played in line with unit objectives. Critical reflection on what we did was always, I'm very big on that. It was always very apparent in lessons. I absolutely smashed the year 11s with theoretical concepts and things, which I'll show you below as well. And I did that in a way that was hopefully really supportive to them coming to know what these concepts were, but in a way that wasn't, you know, in that moment, you have to get this right now before I move on kind of thing. So that was a fairly big learning for me, is just to actually slow down a little bit, because I talk a mile a minute. I think people understand things when I understand things, and obviously that's not the case. It's a pretty crazy place up here sometimes. I was very cautious, I guess, as to the amount of sort of cognitive load that I placed on the students as well. I didn't sort of want to demand, like the bar was set high still, but it wasn't perhaps as high as that it had been had they been in front of me in class, because me being the high jump mat underneath this bar wasn't there. So I didn't want it to fall there without me being able to catch or support them. We also loaned out a lot of classroom instruments, which initially was a little bit tense for me, but I let them go. And some of the things that came out the other side were just absolutely wonderful. And I've written a bit on that somewhere else that I might share as well a little bit later. But I better get into what I actually did and what I learned as well. One of the biggest things is I have an incredible team of people around me, and they have been absolutely extremely flexible and willing to look at new ways of doing things, very accommodating to the different demands and needs of people, as in fellow staff and students in their care. It was really, really great to just have that sort of reaffirmed, because I know they're pretty fantastic already. But just to see them go well over and above was great. The students responded generally really quite well to these live lessons that we did. I felt more tentative students spoke up more, and students who were behavioural issues or got off task or whatever, there was no one to sort of play up to really. And it was being recorded, your bad behaviour as well anyway. So that sort of quashed that quite quickly, which is great. I think largely, especially with my year 11s, we did some really heavy stuff that I'll show you. And for some of them, it gave this sort of space that was offered through this environment, gave them really time just to digest at their own pace what I was asking them to do, try new things out, not in the heat of the moment of the classroom, or I'd like to think I don't sort of pressure them to respond or get things right all the time. But I think it really offered them the ability just to explore stuff in their own time, which I think was very well sort of received. It took that perceived threat sort of away from that, you know, that social sort of in the moment, I feel a bit, you know, under the microscope or something. So I thought that was actually a really good sort of learning from this as well, or finding from this as well, close bracket. After a few weeks, the importance of that social sort of interaction with the kids, though, became really apparent, that we weren't getting that, of course, through these means. So we did look at other ways to sort of try and connect them. And interestingly, we did that through Soundtrap as well. So they were collaborating on work through Soundtrap. And I had the same sort of issue that Sarah had with kids getting into it, or the band lab, but getting into it before we sort of released the class codes for the EDU version. So it created a bit of havoc with Canvas later on. But, you know, all of that aside, to see them work together and co-create work was really quite special. And there was a greater sense, I think, of them taking a bit of a risk, particularly in composition, and trying new pieces of software that I'll show you very soon as well. I'm quite hopefully aware of what the students get up to musically outside of school, but of course don't know it all. But I just turned at new musicalities were sort of revealed to me. These kids that I didn't really perceive as maybe being super musical really got into, you know, a piece of software or an app or whatever, and really created this work that was quite good. And out of the woodwork came all of these kids that said, oh yeah, I play guitar and here's a song that I want you to listen to. So I really tried to celebrate that as well. And that's an ongoing thing with me, to really try and get across to the school that music is music. It's not, you know, you don't have to be part of this program or that ensemble or that band or that choir. It's about whatever music floats your boat is worthy of study. Anyway, so getting to the stuff that you probably want to hear, hopefully, is sort of what that potentially sort of looks like. And our Year 7 unit, I thought, was a good place to start with. Really just chucked everything out, started again with Year 7. And this unit, we run semester units now because we were finding that the business of this school, a term just isn't long enough to really explore what we want to explore and keep that sort of theme strong through this learning, and have it really accumulate and build and, you know, revisit concepts and practice and sort of embed them in our memory that way, was just not happening in that short time frame. So we've gone to 2 units, one called Rhythms and Riffs that was just beautifully, it just sort of worked really well in terms of moving it into an online remote sort of environment. And our second one was called What's My Motive, which I've sort of written on before. There's a link down the bottom that could equally as transition as well into an online or remote environment. So essentially we're looking at patterns in music, how and why musicians use patterns in music. So that seems like a very simple question to look at. I think in Queensland it's been quite a common Year 11 sort of unit, but I have never really done anything like that. So I thought, you know, let's give it a go. Patterns and shapes and things in music. And there's an awful lot to look at. It very much transcends genre and style, which is great. I think almost every piece of music has some kind of pattern or shape that is worthy of study within it. So it was, we can look at it harmonically, rhythmically, in terms of pitch, melodically. So yeah, it's a really ripe sort of unit for us to explore. And we looked at heaps of different repertoire, with heaps of oral-based responding sort of activities. And we just made the change before this thing called COVID that you might have heard of started. And we were looking at, instead of having the bigger task towards the end of the terms, looking at doing a series of smaller tasks in both composition and performance, and compiling that into a folio, which may or may not be anything new, but it's new for us. That really just got to solve some problems of kids being away and missing key points of work. So that folio essentially works that there are 5 submissions for performance and composition over the term, and we take 3 of that. They choose which 3 we mark. So we haven't sort of come unstuck there, and it's worked beautifully well. We have quite a, Year 7 and 8 music goes through year still here, which is really great. I feel very, very lucky for that to be the case still. But we have a single lesson a week. So, you know, you miss one, that's a fortnight between you seeing them again. So, you know, it can be quite easy for a student to miss a lesson, miss part like a hinge part of the work. So anyway, that was our response to this. And some of the activities within this unit that we'd sort of done through Canvas, and I've got the Year 11 Canvas page queued up, but we used that platform to essentially share some of these activities. We were very much looking at this Ableton Make Beats Groove Pizza. I came across this guy, Ethan Hine, on Twitter, of all places, and he's absolutely remarkable with how he thinks and what he writes about. He works at in New York, somewhere at a university. I suspect he seems like a bit of a renegade sessional, and I mean that in a really nice way. His writing is fantastic, but he sort of made me become aware of Ableton Make Beats. He was actually one of the co-developers, I believe, of Groove Pizza, which I will show you. But essentially the tasks that we sort of started with were, if I go into, you can still see that screen, hopefully loading. Fantastic. So look, we were using these very simple grid pattern kind of arrangements. I'll just click play. Really neat interface, so beautiful and clean and crisp to work with. And seriously, if you want to waste an afternoon, have a look at all the stuff that's on offer there as well. I'll share this link to you if you are not aware of it already. But essentially, I was getting students to, discern, work out, realize drum beats to certain patterns. So we're sort of working orally to derive these patterns. So like the first piece I used was Please Don't Be an Ad. No, great. This was like a really clear sort of drum beat that we could work with. And the students essentially, essentially recreated that sort of pattern. So whatever they thought it was, they sort of click in and play and change the tempo and things. And they just ate that up, thought that was really fantastic. That was, of course, scaffolded quite heavily before with a really simple version like We Will Rock You, I think I used. We then moved on the same sort of principle in this Groove Pizza app, which I thought was fantastic. Okay, so if I just sort of, I don't know if anyone's seen this before, but essentially you can sort of draw shapes around, you can move where beats fall and align, you can use this grid pattern down here. You can change style, put swing, all of that kind of stuff. You can sort of basically pre-order stuff as well. You can pre-order a pizza and play around with the beats and rhythms and things go. And initially, I guess, probably balked at it a little bit because it's quite a complex, busy interface. But the familiarity of this section down here, that sort of grid-like pattern, that 4/4 sort of pattern down there was enough, I think, to keep them sort of enthused and going about recreating a beat inspired by a Daft Punk song called Around the World. We also did So Fresh, So Clean by Outkast. Of course, I didn't share these videos, just the audio, because they're probably not the most appropriate to share in terms of the vision that you see on them. But with So Fresh and So Clean, so this song, which is a pretty cool song as well. Just totally represents me musically too, doesn't it? Okay, so that pattern's 2 bars long. So essentially that Ableton has a playground as well. So you can essentially explore the same thing, this same beat sort of pattern arrangement over a longer sort of period, or a 2-bar period in this case. And there's a few more options in terms of sort of sounds and things that we're using as well. So that was, that was a whole lesson pretty much, working that out. It was done remotely, of course. So students also uploaded, I didn't show you the fact that you can, it's just behind the, export to live here. And there was a function in there that allowed us to save it as an MP3 or something. And then that was uploaded to Canvas. So we sort of kept track, as I said at the top, we were sort of tracking how students were engaging with things as well, just up in here. So tracking of student engagement and these smaller weekly class things. And essentially one of the assessment tasks became, as we were sort of forced to move into this environment, was to actually, this became one of the samples that they needed to drop into their folio for, no, sorry, that was their learning thing. I'm thinking of another class. Yeah, but they were recreating things using Ableton Playground, Groove Pizza, and Ableton Make Beats and things. We also got a bit more adventurous and did things like, just find something around your house and make a polyrhythmic percussion score with it, which I thought was a little bit daggy, but one of the other teachers pushed it and thought, okay, let's go with this. And it was probably one of the most favoured compositions that the kids did. And they essentially layered that up in Soundtrap, which I'll very quickly show you. It's been talked about before. I may be logged in, so I don't know what it's going to... Anyway, it's very similar to what Sarah showed you before as well. Look, I won't waste your time with that at this stage, but essentially very similar to that BandLab, they could import their own files that are recorded straight into their laptops or their iPads, which they all have their own school issued, or bring your own device as well. They all have phones. So it was quite easy for them to get it into Soundtrap and manipulate it and layer it that way. And there was also the demand for them to eventually turn that into, it written in terms of notation as well. So that was a task that extended beyond that. So everything was linked in, everything was meaningful, very much focused, as you can see, on the unit of the topic, the rhythms and riffs section. So essentially what you're seeing there is pretty much the first part of a lesson of a TLAP, essentially, and how it sort of looked like and came together. We used a whole lot of other platforms and experimented with a whole lot of things. I would keep all of those tasks in this new environment, or the new normal, I guess you'd call it, and not just relegate them to the online sort of realm. I think they're really quite valuable, and they really open up, schemes of meaning for kids. They can do things in their own time, in their own way, in their own place. We also did a lot of performance work, singing, not through these means, but we'd pre-record stuff and get them to sing along and upload their parts and things like that, and have that as an ongoing sort of portfolio of work that is compiled into assessment. Some of the other platforms that we've used that I haven't mentioned as well, that I thought would be really good at sort of maybe developing further. We use these as sort of, this period is a bit of a testing ground for kids using things as well. I got that idea of when the Levy breaks and around the world and that derivation stuff from essentially this app, which is like an online sort of accordion almost. And essentially what you do is, queue up your song, and then underneath you, as it's, let's pick one, hey? Let's Get Lucky. And then I basically try and work out, okay, I'm getting old. How's this working? Okay, it's not available in my country. Great. Okay, well, this is quite awkward now, isn't it? Let's find one that is available in Australia. Cool. And we were sort of just working out, like, there'd be a task set to work out the baseline. And sort of just orally sort of work out what's going on. Oh, excuse me, I clicked on an ad. So I thought that was, I'm just brushing over this quickly because there's a whole other year level to go as well. But that was a really wonderful tool as well. We did come up with, how appropriate is some of these songs that are queued up as well. So that's something we'd probably wrestle with and learn from, probably not in, luckily not in a bad way, but I thought hang on, I just said there's a way to sort of, cull some of that down into like a more appropriate playlist. And I guess that's where we sort of came back to this Ableton Playground, which is really great, and us giving them essentially a YouTube clip to do the same thing. So through that online accordion, they were looking at deriving riffs and bass lines and other little musical features as well. There's a whole range of great things in Chrome Music Experiments if you haven't come across these before. I feel like a bit of a technical whiz now, but I've never really worked in this way until this period. But these are really fantastic. I use some of these for my primary school classes, my year 4s and 5s. There's one of them, it's just slipping my mind at the moment because sort of, you could essentially set like the parameters on, say, your melody, so it was only pentatonic. And so that was brilliant for our year 4s and 5s who are sort of working with, 5-note sort of compositions and singing, music in that limited sort of pitch repertoire, or pitch range. So we could sort of, our faces are in the way. Here we go. So we could sort of play around with things like that, just really simple melodies. Going back into some other examples through Chrome Music were like similar with SongMaker, a bit more flexible there, looking at arpeggios and rhythms. And this is actually quite handy chords for our year 7s, working out different varieties and qualities of chords and things and what they look like on keyboard activities that we're asking them to play. So look, quite simple little apps, but I thought really quite accessible. and worthy of sort of maybe sharing with you guys as well. And you may be all over this. That's the thing. I'm not professing to say, hey, no one's ever seen this before. You guys have stuff to show me, I know. But I thought these were really accessible things for our students here. And my year 11s even use some of them as well. We have Splice Sounds Beatmaker that we also played with, similar concept. All this is free. Doesn't really matter what platform you're on, what computer you're on. Same kind of thing, a bit more flexible with some sounds. So Splice Sounds was actually quite cool. Super Looper was, there's these like things that I don't know what they're called that cool DJ people use, touchpads or something. Yeah, showing my age and musical tastes, but I can record different things into here, add bass, chords, rhythms and drum parts and things, and essentially share that recording. And so we're
if you're
playing
really
beats and loops and things. Yep.
Kate, if you're really committed to getting to the year 11 stuff,
Let's move.
You've got 5 minutes.
Perfect. So, okay,
Excellent.
forget everything I've just said. Year 11s.
Sorry,
No,
I
just kidding.
have a Zoom choir rehearsal to run at 5 o'clock.
Louise,
so
hello.
I don't love listening to you, Cade.
You'll see the
Louise.
very last bit on the playback video.
I have to get the keyboard out and everything else. So yes, I didn't want you to take offense.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know you were here, so please don't take offense at that. I'm too wrapped up in my own little screen. But I'll see the lovely Louise soon. I'll email you this. I'll email this to you all.
Yes.
And really quickly with year 11s, Jason is here, I know, over the other side of the country, but, you know, I'm sure it's useful in some way here, but for the Queensland people on the other side of the screen, we're all in designs if you teach year 11 at the moment, or most likely in designs. I smashed these poor kids. They're very, very capable though. So we were looking at a big focus on harmony for me. They've come out of year 10 music doing quite a bit. They've had a look at, you know, basic sort of diatonic harmony and function of diatonic harmony. We are in natural harmonic minor scale and major sort of forms. So we now look at diminished, augmented. We look at seventh chords, secondary dominance we did, and other extensions like 6/9 chords with the kids have fallen in love with because it's into the unknown. And yes, I'm admitting that live, that I did Into the Unknown from Frozen 2 with year 11s, but it has every compositional device under the sun, extensions, 6/9 chords, all of this great stuff in there. So we unpackaged sort of that through repertoire, which I thought was really important. I used a thing called Explain EDU, which is just here so an example of me and the seventh chord thing was, I'm not going to let you, I won't, watch the whole thing here, of course, but if I just zip through, you'll see I've queued a stuff up there and the sound files of me playing. Sorry, that's in the way. There we go. So that's me just writing on the screen. It was actually my daughter's iPad I stole and used, and I wrote on the screen and sort of talked about what a secondary dominant is and movement, and played the chords, recorded them into the top there, and sort of talked about voicing and how they move and all of that kind of stuff. So that was, you can watch that in your own time. You can do whatever you want with that. You can not watch it, or you can watch it several times, or do whatever you want with it to unpack some of this heavy stuff we were doing. I had supporting that. I'm a big worksheet person. I'm so sorry for scrolling back and forth, but our worksheets like supported. No, they're not really worksheets. I'll just call them help sheets. So all help sheets on harmony that I did up for the kids to just recapture and reconfirm that knowledge that they've gained in year 10. Basic harmonic movement and stuff there, functional sort of harmony. The secondary dominant stuff, we looked at the Beatles. This is essentially the video that accompanies this worksheet is the video I showed you before, accompanies this worksheet. So we talked about secondary dominance and things like that. And we also talked about seventh chords and things like that. So I was on the other end of the screen, don't forget, playing and like talking about the qualities of these and asking them questions. And it really, to get back to sort of what I was trying to talk about, nothing really changed terribly apart from just the fact that everything took 4 hours longer to do than I normally would expect it to take. Yeah, so that was one big thing. And there's a whole bunch of other compositional activities I did under there. I suspect my time's pretty much up. Really quickly, 3-note compositions that we did. This scale wheel thing was fantastic for kids to work out qualities of harmony and chords and bits and pieces like that. 3-note composition was really popular. We reharmonized Happy Birthday independently, so had kids do it on MuseScore and Noteflight and Sibelius if they'd signed it out. Some of them do it with their voice only, which gave me the idea to say, here's another melody, just use a voice to harmonize this with some of the harmony we've been talking about. Just use your instrument in another piece, just use Sibelius in another piece, to really try and attack that different way of representing music as well. Compositional work that they did was uploaded to SoundCloud, and I essentially commented, and we commented on each other's work through SoundCloud. So that's a really fantastic free platform as well to set everything to private. And you're good to go pretty much. And it's link sharing sort of only. But that's a really great way to draft their compositional work, because they're on FA2 at the moment as well. And the last thing I'll talk about really quickly is this collaborative playlist idea that came out of nowhere, or maybe someone told me and I forgot it and then thought I created it. I don't know, but I said, here's a playlist, add to it. And they just went to town and added a bunch of music that they listened to. I started with the year 12s and I said, if you think a piece is innovative, which is the theme of the unit, as we know, you put it in that playlist. And some of the stuff that they listened to is just absolutely remarkably like diverse. And I've found new music that I like. I've had reconfirmed to me music that I don't like. There's a whole bunch of things in there that I said, put it in there if you're prepared for me to deconstruct it and us to talk about it analytically. And heaps of stuff went in there that I'm now using in the innovations unit, because I got all the way up to popular stuff and I thought, oh, I'm not very popular. What am I going to do? How about you help me out? So I rolled the Spotify playlist idea over year 11 class as well. And we're using that in designs to unpack how the music that they're listening to is designed. So, you know, potentially that backward mapping sort of approach, or backwards design that's in the syllabus sort of approach as well, which I never thought I'd really work with, but am now being sort of convinced otherwise through the music they listen to, which is great. So it's just a really quick snapshot of what I've been doing. I just wanted it to be as normal as possible, but I guess the big sort of takeaway for me was we can do a lot of the stuff that they're doing through the wonderful support of these applications, which are becoming more accessible, you know, user-friendly, and really open the ability for kids to really explore what music is to them. It doesn't have to be limited to what we do here in a classroom. Everything we can that we've done from this experience, we can transfer to our everyday or our new normal here. We've refreshed ways of doing old things. Hopefully we've talked about also just, you know, teaching music in a musical way still. I don't think that has to be compromised in this environment. And hopefully I've sort of shown that too through a bit of an insight into some of the things that we did in 2-year levels. So.